I'm the underdog with the heroic heart. I'm Eric Jones Jr. I have to keep pushing for my kids. If I give up, what's that leave them with? Nothing. I have to understand that it's bigger than me. That it's not about me when I wake up and go to work. It's not about me when I'm reading and educate myself. It's not about me when I'm practicing my speeches. It's not about me. It's about my family. Hey, you're now tuned in to Underdog Talk. I'm your host, Eric Jones Jr., the underdog with the heroic heart, and I have another successful underdog that I'm going to have a great conversation with that pertains to mental health, since it is Mental Health Month. So this is the first episode of in May that we will have mental health, because we're going to talk about that because that's very important for us. And I have Miss Zen Ashe. She's a podcaster, educator. She's about to be able to go full-time entrepreneur by the end of this year. She's an artist, a writer, an author, and a consultant. And she is from down south. She's from Texas. Well, she lives in Texas. She's from Baton Rouge. How are you doing, Miss Zen?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me on your show.
Thank you for being on the show. And before we get into our conversation, today's sponsor is brought to you by Christian Dewan, Positive Energy Through Your Clothes. We have toddler, infant, youth, women, men. We got it for everybody. We got shirts, we got hoodies. Definitely gonna get some shorts coming in. If you use the promo code Underdog Talk, you get 15% off. And Underdog is spelled UNDERDAWG. If you use the promo code Underdog Talk, 15% off, ChristianDewan.com. And that is our sponsor for today. So, going into mental health, we both kind of have somewhat of a similar story when it comes to kind of finding out our mental health. I'll let you go first, ladies first. But I guess we found mental health during a relationship, during a marriage. And so how did that look for you? What were things looking like to where you was like, something wrong? I need to figure it out. I need to get some type of help because the help that I've been getting isn't working.
Well, my first foray into therapy was during my marriage, because I was kind of raised that you stay married no matter what, you don't give up. And so I felt like it was my job to keep the marriage together. And then when I went to therapy, my therapist was like, it takes two people, and it sounds like you're not in a safe situation. So maybe you need to think about your safety. Maybe you need to think about your mental, emotional, and physical safety, which I wasn't thinking about that time. So therapy kind of helped me realize that I needed to take care of me. And then after we got divorced, I realized I needed to go back into therapy because I had lost myself in that relationship. I really didn't have high self-esteem. I didn't have a secure identity. I felt like a failure. And so I went to support groups. I went to individual therapy. I was given a lot of books to read, about trauma, PTSD. I was also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, so that my therapist felt like that was some of the damage that led to me being in that relationship. So that was my first, I guess you could say, baptism into therapy. And like I said, going to support groups, I went through like a divorce recovery group at a church. So that's kind of how I started with dealing with my mental health.
That's kind of similar to me. I started getting therapy during our marriage, and first we were like in a marriage group, like an online community. So that was kind of helping because we had coaches and stuff of that sort. But then I got my own therapy, and that's kind of where I was like, something's wrong. Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I feel like it's my wife and my kids versus me. Like, it was like something was going on, and I wasn't myself. I wasn't Eric, and that's what led me to kind of like the similar to you. Like, it wasn't nothing crazy going on, but it was like, I can't be in this situation. It's not working for me. It's not allowing me to be the person that I'm supposed to be, and nothing, necessarily could be wrong with my ex-wife, but it was more so it was stuff wrong with me, like childhood stuff. And it was like when we were talking, I'm like, dang, that's why I act like that. And I remember certain stuff and I'm like, okay. And that was where I started my mental health. I didn't really like support groups. Like I kind of would talk to married men, kind of, get some advice and stuff of that sort. I didn't really read any books. We did have a book that, when we were married, we were supposed to read, but I didn't read books. I started journaling. So for me, like journaling, what really helped me, just writing down how I felt every day, like the real thoughts. And that's where I started to work on my mental health by, going to therapy and then journaling, especially after the divorce. I still am in therapy and I don't journal as much, but when I definitely was, like, I look back at those notes and be like, man, I was going through it. And that's kind of like my gist of, mental health, per se. So with you, when, how did you like, how did you get into therapy? Was it someone telling you? Was it like you just going? Because I know for our community, like therapy wasn't the first option. It was probably the last of the last option to go to because just how we were brought up, just how our community thinks. So how was going to therapy for you?
Well, I was kind of in a church group also, and then we had through my job, we had a thing called the Employee Assistance Program, where you actually got 3 sessions for an issue for free. So I was finding myself struggling a lot at work. I was distracted. I couldn't concentrate. I felt kind of, I guess you could say, overwhelmed, confused. I just had a lot of emotions that were dealing with me. And so when I was thinking, okay, this is impacting me as a mom, this is impacting me as a worker, I need to find a way to deal with my emotions better. That's really why I went in the beginning. And I was also trying to get some advice because, like I said, I was kind of raised like a woman's supposed to keep her family together and my husband's cheating. So, what am I supposed to do? And, he seems to have these anger issues. So, I got to fix that. So, I felt like I needed to fix my marriage and fix him. And just emotionally, it was taking such a toll on me. I didn't know how to handle it. So that's how I got into therapy because it was free and all I had to do was basically sign up. That was it. There was no excuse in my head not to use this in a sense. It was just another tool. Either it was going to work or it wasn't going to work. But like I said, it had more impact on me than I thought because it brought in such a different perspective. Sometimes in the church, they put a lot of burdens on people rather than taking them off.
Mm.
And that's my experience anyway. So I felt much more burdened by the church than I felt uplifted and encouraged because it was like, well, if you pray and fast more and you need to get that man in church all the time. You guys aren't regular enough. Maybe you need to seed an offering for the marriage restoration and things like that. And I'm like, okay, that's not exactly what I was expecting you to say. So I ended up, like I said, looking for an alternative, something that I felt was going to help me where I was, help me with my mindset, help me with my emotions, help me to deal with these thoughts of failure and my marriage is like, why is all this like this? What have I done? And then she was like, well, why is it what you've done? Why are you taking responsibility for this other person like they don't have a say, like they didn't make choices? So that was kind of what it helped me see things very differently than the way that I was raised. So it was eye-opening for me to realize I had a role, but I didn't have complete responsibility of everything going on. And it wasn't all my fault, so that was very helpful for me. And that's how I started in therapy.
I see you got the free. We ain't really turning down free. We're gonna check it out, and then that was helpful. And that's kind of it wasn't through my job, but because my ex-wife, she was going to going to counseling regularly, and she was like, you should go, you should go. I'm like, and then I found out, well, it wasn't free, but it was like $5 or $10, so it wasn't nothing. And so I'm like, all right, let me at least try it. And I was like, I love it. Cause like I'm talking to somebody, like I can really talk to this person. They not really judging me. Like I can, tell them, get stuff off my chest. And that started to help. And just I was excited. I used to love going back, like going to counseling. Like it was very helpful. And so when I started to realize like, it didn't have nothing to do with like my ex-wife. It's like I didn't love myself. Like at some point, like I stopped loving me. And then that's when everything started falling apart. So I just kept going, and I was like, I wasn't getting back to being myself just yet, but I was like, I got to get out of this relationship. If I don't get out of this relationship, I don't know if I'm going to be able to like necessarily get back, because I did cheat. So I'll admit that, but it wasn't, for me, it was like, okay, even if I didn't cheat, I don't think I was still like, it didn't have necessarily do with sex. It kind of did, but it didn't. But it wasn't really like things was going right. Like I didn't want to be at home. Like I didn't like being around. Like it was just a lot of stuff was going on. And as I'm learning about this counseling and learning about myself and learning where all this stuff comes from like childhood, when stuff happened or when people disappointed me, or like the way that, I kind of operate from learning from other people. And it was like, yeah, you gotta get out of there. And so when I got out of there and still kept going, I definitely got some mentors, like, but I feel you on the church part, because like church, they like there for you, and then you say you getting a divorce, oh, they like, oh, we don't know who you are. Like, dang, we was just cool. And it's like, dang, that's really how it is. Like, is like you treat somebody like that, like, because when somebody going through a divorce, like it could be a good divorce, it could be a bad one, but if you married to a person, like, you gonna feel it. And then like the people that you was getting the support from or you was cool with, like they just dip on you because you got the divorce. And I'm like, dang, it's really like that, it's the end of the world type thing. And it just was crazy, because God put me in isolation. Like I ended up, like it was just me. And when I mean just me, I got an apartment. It was just me in the apartment in my clothes. Like I didn't have nothing at first. So it was like going from a family, then having nothing. I mean, having nothing and just being me. Like if I didn't have counseling, I probably would have went crazy. And that's what a lot happens with a lot of people. Like we get in situations, stuff happens, and we be in it alone. And when we're in it alone, that's when those thoughts happen. That's when the crazy stuff. That's when you like, oh, it was me. It was all me. Everything in a relation, And it's like when you have counseling or you have someone you can go talk to, and they can give you uh the blind side, like in football, a blind side, they can see the stuff that you can't see because it's your blind side, and it makes sense to you. And like you said, you start understanding and looking at life different, like the way you was kind of brought up, or just how just how you were thinking, and you like, So, do you have children?
I do. I had 2 children with him. They're grown now. My kids are 27. They just had a birthday on Saturday. So I have twin boys.
Oh, hey, wait a second. My birthday was Saturday, so happy birthday to them too. That's a great day.
That is a great day. So you guys are birthday twins. Look at that. Oh my gosh. Wow.
Yeah. So
Small
yeah,
world. What is the likelihood of that happening? That's pretty amazing.
exactly. So if you want any advice on your children being born on May 7th or how they act, just let me know, because they're tourists. I'm sure they're similar to me. That's funny.
Probably so. Yeah.
So we're having children, with going through the divorce, you going through therapy. How did that like play an effect on you with your children, and how did that kind of play effect on your children? Like maybe you could maybe see like their mental health, or how things change for them. Like on your end, I want to see like from a mom's perspective.
Well, I will say this. My situation. I mentioned that I was in a domestic violence situation, and generally it takes women about 3 times to leave. So the third time that I left, um, one of the officers, because I had to call the cops on him because he was being violent. One of the officers handed me this like pamphlet, right, and it had all these numbers on it. and it had a number for like this counseling center. It had a number for the Houston Women's Center. It had a bunch of other numbers and a bunch of advice, you know. And I actually called the Women's Center, and that was where I started going to a support group. And they actually had support groups for kids because when I left, my kids were 6. So they were
Hmm.
young, but they were still you could talk to them, you know what I'm saying? You could interact with them. They could talk about their feelings even though they were young. So the great thing about the Houston's Women's Center is they had basically little support group play groups for the kids while the parents were going to their support groups. And so my kids they had kind of a age appropriate kind of support group kind of thing going on with play and people, you know, talking to them about their feelings and different things, letting them kind of vent, I guess you could say, about things. So that was really helpful to me to feel like, okay, I'm coming out of this and my kids are getting help too. And so then it took me 2 years to kind of get my head back together and feel like, okay, I'm ready to try again. I'm ready for another relationship. Because I did lose myself in that relationship, and then I did have a lot of unhealthy thought patterns and unhealthy, because sometimes things are generational. Even though I wasn't raised in a necessarily physically abusive situation, I did come from, I guess, the generation of women that kind of put up with whatever men did and felt like, you know, they had to deal with that to keep their marriage and keep their man. And so that wasn't the healthiest thought process, you know, to raise someone in, you know. So with my kids, like I said, I felt like they were getting helped, and I felt like I was getting help to transition into being a single mom and being healthy for them. And so I guess that would be my answer to that.
Understand, and that's dope that they had that to where, you know, ooh, excuse me, but they had where kids could get help because that's very important. So on my end of it, like, so I have a son biologically, and then I have a daughter, my stepdaughter. So it hit different for both kids. Like she stopped messing, you know, she see her mom get a divorce. I've been in her shoes when my mom got a divorce, so it's like, oh, I ain't messing with you. You don't, you know, you hurt my mom, and I got it. You know, our relationship got better. We, you know, we cool now, but it definitely took some time. My son, his behavior was horrible. Like,
Mm.
but he wasn't like acting out necessarily at school. It was at home because he like my daddy gone. Like, so he like, you know, my boys are mama's boys, but then it's like me and him got a close relationship because you know, I've been there. Me and his mom been together his whole life, so he's seen me every single day, unless you know we on the trip, whatever the case may be. But so it hit him different. He used to be like, "Oh, I want to go to my daddy house." Like he was like all that. But then I started to notice like when he be at my house and something went wrong, he'd be like, "Oh, I want my mom." I'm like, "Okay, we gonna fix this little issue." But his mom got him counseling at school, you know, to go talk. And I think my daughter already was kind of in counseling for her own stuff. And so they kind of was already in it, and it was cool to be able to let them talk to somebody else and see, you know, what could be wrong. Because I've been in their shoes. My mom got a divorce when I was in 5th grade to my sister's dad, which was like my dad. So I definitely felt and you know everything they did. So for me, I wasn't like when the behaviors change, it wasn't like, oh, let's yell at them, let's get, you know, hey, we understand, we gotta explain it. Then when me and their mom got back cool, they got to see us at least have a good relationship, good co-parenting. Like, you know, we have our ups and downs, but we good on the communication. We don't really argue in front of them. If we do argue, which we don't as much anymore, but it took some time. But it's just dope. I wish like they wonder if they have that here where you can take kid like where if you go in like the kids can go and then like it's kind of a family thing because sometimes especially you said your kids were 6 so they looking at it like oh we going with mommy we going to have fun and you know we going to the little play area or whatever but they really getting help because kids like oh we get to have fun but then you know they slide in whatever so I really like that like that's really dope that that was able to happen
Yeah,
so go
wonderful.
ahead. Yeah, I'm sure. So you said you got back out like in are you like did you get back out in dating or are you still kind of waiting? Because I know for me it took me like a couple years after the divorce to even want to go talk to somebody else. You know what I'm saying? So have you like moved on? Not saying you serious. I don't know what your situation.
Well,
How long did that process take?
I got my first divorce in 1999. So my kids
Mm-hmm.
were 6 back then. And so it took me about 2 years to get my head together and really reframe my idea of relationships and have a healthier idea of relationships. And so I ended up getting remarried in 2003. And we had a great marriage for quite a while, and then we started to have some issues. He had health issues that he decided he just wasn't going to treat, and they affected our marriage. Because it basically made him impotent. So he couldn't like get and keep erections, and so that was very difficult to deal with because we had no sex life.
Yeah.
And it kind of made him depressed and withdrawn, and to the point where after a while we became like coworkers, and we just talked about the kids, bills, and house, and we didn't have like any romantic interaction at all. And so that was difficult to deal with. And I did some journaling too, because I started journaling in 5th grade, and I journaled on and off my whole life. In fact, I wrote a guided journal because it helped me so much in dealing with certain things that I was going through. But I ended up getting divorced again 7 years ago, because it just got to a point where the kids had graduated from high school, and we had no relationship at all. And he had basically told me, well, I'm not going to get this treated. You're going to have to deal with the sexless marriage. And it would have happened sooner or later, because it's probably an age thing. Everybody has to deal with this. We just have to deal with it earlier. And I'm like, no, I didn't really sign up for that. And I feel like you should, kind of swallow your pride and just go to the doctor, just see what's wrong with you. Because if it's a medical issue, it can affect a lot more than just sex.
Yeah.
It could be something serious. And it did turn out to be that and all that stuff. So later he had some several complications from it, but as it turned out to be basically diabetes. But
Mm-hmm.
so, I went back into some therapy, because by that time I had been in a sexless marriage like 9 years, and I felt very
Mm-hmm.
attractive. I felt like, kind of, again, I was dealing with low self esteem. I was dealing with just, again, kind of feeling like a failure. But I also decided that I was going to, in a sense, revamp my life, because I felt like I had been very traditional, very conservative, tried to be the church girl, tried to do all the things right. And I was like, I'm gonna do a little more. Let me explore what else is out there. Let me date more. Let me, maybe try some unconventional things. And that was really a turning point for me, because I really felt like I kind of came out of my shell and let my true self come out. I became a podcaster, I became an author, and I hadn't really had the guts, in a sense, to take a lot of risks, because I was just trying to do what everybody else says: get a real job, get married, raise your kids, be a good wife. And I was trying to do that. And I realized that all of that for me had been very limiting, that there was a lot more to me than just being a wife and a mother and having a good job that's 9 to 5, that I could do a lot more with my life.
I love it. I love how like it was like, dang, it was sounding real bad at first. I was like, dang, I feel bad for just like woo, like 9 years. That's woo. I don't know. I know me. I know. Anyways. But I was like, everybody goes through their go through. But I like what you said. You revamp. You like, all right. I kind of been going with what my mama them said, like how I seen this, and it's like, no, that ain't really it. That kind of the same thing for me. Like even as a kid, I was like, I don't know about this job stuff. Like it just didn't sit well with me. School didn't really sit well with me. Crazy thing, I'm a teacher, so I don't know how that worked out. But it was like school. I mean, like working at 9 to 5 just didn't sit well. So even though I have a job now, it's like I'm doing podcasts. I'm doing speaking. I got a clothing line, so it's like I got stuff that I'm doing. And it's like, that ain't what I seen growing up. And it's like, I've always thought different. I've always questioned why we got to do this, why we got to do that. And it's like after the divorce, it was like, who I can be me without somebody like on my coattail. And being in counseling, or just really journaling and really like feeding my mind. Like I'm a learner of like watching something. Like I could watch YouTube videos, or because I like taking notes or listening to podcasts. So I, definitely made sure, like, when it comes to mental health, you got to feed your mind too. Like, it's like some of the stuff we watch, or some of the people we're around, some of the environments we're in, it messes with our thoughts, and it makes us think certain stuff is okay, or we can be comfortable with it. It's like, no, that I don't know, that just don't sit well with me. And I always like have to like really think, like, just be yourself. And when you can be yourself, because I always say this, everybody didn't like Jesus. Everybody ain't gonna like me. So long as I'm being my authentic self, the people that supposed to like me are supposed to. And I think people get in relationships and forget who they are. They lose themselves. They stop loving themselves. Because one of the things you said earlier, you start doing stuff for yourself, and you start loving yourself again. Because if you can't love yourself, or if you can't be in your own company, how you gonna be around anybody else? And that's one of the things I learned the most, when God was like, all right, you don't need no, I'm wiping everybody, your friends, everybody, and it's just you. And I was sitting there like, okay, what I'm supposed to do? And then, so mine is more recent, and then COVID happened too. So, with COVID, everybody at home, I'm at home by myself. I can't talk to nobody. I'm used to playing with the kids and all that. And I'm just like, what is going on? But then I start watching stuff, or start just, I talk to myself. I know I heard geniuses talk to themselves. So I'm gonna leave it at that. But I had like talk, and I like had to like entertain myself, and like, uh just keep my own company. And I'm like, I enjoy sitting at home, because I remember as a kid, I was always on punishment. So I was always in my room by myself, and I, did whatever in the room, and I enjoyed my company. And I think sometimes it happens. How do you look at that, like, in relationships, when it comes to like mental health, of from a woman's aspect, or just mental health in general, like when it comes to like self-care and self-love?
Well, once I let myself really develop all my skills and talents, and I'm still trying to do that now, just dig deep inside and pull out everything that I have, I decided that I was never going to go into another relationship where I felt like I had to go back into a box and take away from myself the ability to be creative and the ability to take risks and try new things. Um, so I kind of felt like, sometimes people, they're like, oh, I met you this way, I want you to stay this way. No, I plan on evolving. I plan on, I might be very different 5 years from now than I am today. Because 2 years ago, I didn't have any books. Now I got three of them. That means my whole life has changed because of that. You know, um, 4 years ago, I didn't have a podcast. I wasn't even thinking about it, pre-COVID, 2019. So that's actually 3 years. So I plan on evolving. So for me, and I think for many people out there, once you really know who you are and you realize that you want to grow, you have to get with a person who's willing to grow with you, and not a person who wants to stay stagnant, or a person who wants to stay the same. And to me, that's part of self care, because eventually, for me, and for most people that are in my circle, if we were to stay the same and nothing changed in our lives, that would get boring. And then after a while, boring becomes depressing, because you have nothing to look forward to. It's the same thing every day. What are you getting up for? To do the same thing every day? Nothing to happen that's different, no goals, no achievements, nothing to celebrate. So to me, self care can be a lot of things. It can be massages and mani pedis and spa days, and it can be just walking in nature. But it also can be really letting yourself be free to live your best life. Because I'm happier now than I ever was, because I'm actually utilizing all my talents and skills and abilities, and I'm actually challenging myself. so that I'm not, when you grow, you got to move out of your comfort zone, So to me, a little bit of self-care is sometimes challenging yourself and pushing yourself to do better than you did last month or last year or last week, in whatever area. So self-care can be a lot of different things. But for me, I have decided that a relationship for me is great, wonderful, but it's only great and wonderful if that person's willing to grow. And if they're not, then I feel like eventually it's going to end up with us going our separate ways. And I'm just going to have to wait for, my vibration to attract somebody who's on my new wavelength, who is vibrating at the same level as me, who is kind of got a similar mindset to me, a similar energy to me, a similar attitude to me, or a complementary one. You don't have to be the same as people around you, but something that complements you. And so that's part of my self-care, to not have negative people around me, to not have people who have small mindsets, who just see things traditionally and don't want to take any risk in their life, don't want you to take any in yours. Because being a business person, that's a risk. Having a 9 to 5 where you get a steady paycheck, that's, not. So some people have that I want a steady paycheck mentality, and other people have that I can make more if I go out here and I, build these skills and put myself out there and market myself. So I guess that's how I would answer that question.
I definitely understand the last thing that you said, but I definitely I love what you said with self-care is to challenge yourself. And it really is, because you don't want to stay the same. And I feel like throughout life, some of your relationships, they go, they end. And there's nothing wrong, nothing, I think sometimes people be trying to hold on to stuff, and it's like, no, there's nothing wrong with you not being as cool, or even maybe talking to that person, because y'all on you know two different directions. And like you said, it's the vibration, like the energy. I don't think people get, it's like energy. It's like, are we vibing on the level of growth? It could be where we just talking or whatever, but I can tell by your conversation if, are you going to be able to challenge me, or are you going to be able to keep me accountable? Like certain, you talking to a person and they kind of don't click with them, because like you said, some people want to just work a 9 to 5 and they cool with just that. No, that ain't me. Like I can't see myself just be chilling. Like today earlier, I broke down how many hours in the week, how many hours in the day, how many hours I got free. So I'm like, okay, I got these amount of hours free. Like, I don't want somebody that's not thinking like that. Like if you're not thinking like that, then we can't really grow together. And like you said, your relationship can't be good, great if you're not growing. It's like sports. Like you might have a team, they come out the first year, they all right. Next year they do a little better, and then they, now they really good and they winning and they winning and they winning because they grew together. They got better together. And like you said, like if you expect me to be the same person I dang near was last week, something wrong with you. Like I'm trying to be better every single day. So there ain't no point to be with somebody if you think that person just gonna sit there and be the same person you start talking to when y'all first start talking to. If you start dating when you 20 and you expect them to be the same at 30, 35, 40, you need to reevaluate life. I'm just saying. I'm sorry to be, kind of mean, but like you shouldn't even expect that. That's like going to a job and you working there for 20 years and you don't get a raise. What's
Yeah.
the point? What's the point? What's the point? What's the point of being there? No, it ain't no point. You ain't doing nothing helping. So I like what you said with the challenging. So we can kind of like, I'm gonna get to know you now. I wrote down some stuff here. You got 3 books. I think I've seen that you was an Amazon bestseller a couple times. You got a podcast. And you say you had like a mental health journal. So kind of tell people what the name of the podcast. You like your books, but like how did that, like through your journey? how did those things kind of like happen for you? Like, was it something you always kind of had in you, and it just, when you found yourself, you was like, hey, let me go back to this? Or was it something that just, as you went through life, it clicked to you that this is what you should be doing?
Well, first it started with writing, because I mentioned that I journaled as a kid, and I always wrote poetry even as a kid, and I wrote essays. And so when I was married, I didn't really do that. I didn't write because I was really poured into my marriage and in raising my kids. But also for me, I had to feel kind of a certain emotional safety, a certain mental safety. And I was in some inner turmoil in those relationships. I was struggling a lot emotionally. In the first one because it was abusive, and the second one because I just felt so neglected. So I just didn't feel kind of the freedom and the emotional safety to write. And so when I came out of those relationships, I went back to writing, which is something that I had loved. I had wanted to be a writer when I was a kid, but everybody was like, that ain't a real job. You can't make money doing that. And so I'll be like, okay, well, I'll be an English teacher. I mean, that's the closest thing I can do to it. And I'll still get, to read and to talk to people about writing and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I did. But then I started writing, and then I started performing, which at the beginning I was a little nervous about, because I was like, I'm an introvert. I don't really see myself in front of people. But there came a point in time when I wanted to just share my writing with people. And I went to an open mic, and I was dating this guy at the time. I called him my muse, because in my book, my second book, it's a memoir. So it kind of goes through my journey, but I called him my muse. And when I came off the stage, he was so excited. He was like, that was incredible. And, he had taken pictures of me, and everybody in the audience was coming up to me. And I was like, oh, I just wanted to share my work. I didn't have any expectations at all of anything. So it shocked me that it resonated with people, and like people were really, they loved it, right? And he was so pumped, and I was like, oh my gosh, okay, I need to do this more. And then so I kind of got hooked on it by accident. I wasn't intending on even doing it again when I got up on the stage. I just wanted to do it once, and I just wanted to share. And so I ended up doing it again and again and again. I ended up getting a lot of things published. And then one time I was at an open mic, and this business owner came up to me. He said, I love your poetry. I really want to do something different than this open mic. I don't like how I don't know how many people are going to show up. I can't advertise it like with any specific people that might have a following. Can you create a show for me? You probably know other poets. You probably know. Can you do that? And I was like, give me a month. So I actually created a show called Laughs and Lyrics, and we were doing it every week for a while. And then I had to kind of slow down to every month. And then that opened up a lot of doors, because I ended up getting a lot of contacts with a lot of people in entertainment, poets, comics, musicians, singers, actors, all kind of people. And so then that just, again, it led to all kind of things. One of the things was when COVID happened, because we had been doing shows, religiously. I had some merchandise by then, because people liked some of the show titles. They liked some of the slogans that we had come up with. So I had merchandise. I opened an online store during COVID, and then they were like, you have a great voice. You should do a podcast. Well, I had never listened to a podcast in my life and didn't know anything about it. But I decided to take a podcasting class, and I had been journaling. But when COVID happened, I started journaling a lot, because I'd had a lot of deaths prior to that time, and also during COVID. And I felt like I had lost everything. I had lost performing, because there were no live shows. I had lost, these people in my life. Everything in the world was changing. And I was like, well, what do I still have? What do I still have? And I started making a list of, I still have my attitude. I still have boundaries. I still am committed to my goals. I still am consistent on a lot of things, even though the whole world has changed. I'm still dedicated. And I started just doing this whole ABC list. And I was like, I could do a podcast, and every week could be one of these words. And we could talk about how we're motivated by this, how we're trying to become better in this area, how this is like a key to success, like what tools have helped us, like books, role models, songs, and people could come on and just tell their story. And so that's actually where the podcast Energy came from. And I started it in October. No, it was September of 2020. And then within less than a year, it was top 10% globally. So that's where that came from. And then people were like, you talk about journaling all the time. Can you teach me how to journal? I was like, yeah, I could do that. And that's where the guided journal came from, because I didn't want to do one like the ones I saw. They were like 365 pages. I wanted to do some short, and I wanted to do something focused, just like the podcast. So every page of the journal was a word, like attitude, boundaries, but then it had a lot of questions. It had a lot of food for thought. It had a place to put role models, songs, movies, books, goals, affirmations, all of the things that you could use to kind of really focus in on an area. And so that one became a bestseller within a few days of releasing it on Amazon. And it stayed on the bestsellers list for about a month. And then people were like, you're a poet. We hear your poetry on your podcast. We see you perform. Where's your poetry book? And I didn't have one. And so last year on my mom's birthday, because she had actually passed 2 years before, I was really stuck. I was really hurting and sad. And I started writing, and I realized that I was writing the memoir that people kept saying I should write. I should write about my dating life. I should write about my journey, how I went from the abusive relationship to where I am now, And I sat down, I started writing, and I was writing that book, which I didn't intend on doing it, but I just sat down and started writing because I was just in my feelings. And then that book became Plenty of Guppies and Other Dating Misadventures. And that one was released on February 10th. It hit number 1 in Native American poetry within a few hours. It stayed number 1 for 37 days. And then it's still number 48 in Native American poetry. And this is May the 9th. So it's gone from number 1 to number 48, but that's still considered a bestseller. Anything in the top 100 in a category is still considered a bestseller. So it is still a bestseller 3 months later. And yeah, people buy a copy every day. I'm selling copies every day. So that's my whole journey in that book. It's got 92 poems in it. It has the last 7 years of my life. It tells a story of everything that happened, and it is pretty inspirational, because I did bounce back from some things, and so that's kind of how all of that happened. And there's a lot of humor in it, because during this last 7 years, this is what kind of hooks people. I went on 147 dates. In the book, there's 101 dates. And every guy has a nickname. So I'm not like putting anybody's personal business out there, because you wouldn't know who it is if they didn't tell you I'm Mr. Nice Guy or I'm the Hunky Letcher or whatever. You wouldn't know, because it's a nickname. You know what I'm saying? So, but so that's kind of how all that happened. And then the workshops came out of that. People were like, well, we want you to come and teach us how to use the journal in person. We want you to come, you talk about breath work. How do you breathe? What kind of breaths do? You talk about meditation, show us how to, how you meditate. And so that's how the workshops came about. So that's kind of how I became a consultant. So everything I've done has kind of been just walking through the door that was opened in front of me and saying, okay, people are asking for this, or I've been given this opportunity, so let me just walk into it. So that's how it happened.
I love it. Because we got somewhat similar, but really what it was, writing. Everything, I think you said writing at least about 20 or more times, because that's who you are. That was your vehicle from a kid, was writing. Anytime you wrote, good things happen. I mean, it was bad stuff that you was writing about, but good things happen when you started writing. So our listeners, I want y'all to understand, you got to have a vehicle. You got to have one vehicle and your vehicle leads you to everywhere you're supposed to be. She just got back to writing, like, all right, let me just write. All right, we need a book. Oh, we need this. We need that. I need a podcast. Now we need this. We need that. And all those things happen because you started writing. Like, even through like having your plays, like I know you was like, write a show. I ain't wrote a show. What's going on? And then boom, COVID happens. And then what I love what you said. You said you had the deaths, you had, the show ending, but you said, what do I still have? What do I still have? Even though, things happen to us in life, what do you still have? And that hit me because like I kind of like stopped speaking when I got a divorce. And it's like, what do I have? What was I doing as a kid? I was talking. I was always like, I think even just me regularly talking was inspiring people throughout life. And then like when you said you went for your first time and, they were like, yeah, woo, everybody's excited. And you like, oh, I was just, up here, just doing something. And that happened for me when the first time I spoke. It wasn't like I was just doing something, but I spoke and people were like, you inspire me in this. I'm like, my story, my life. Okay, let me figure this thing out. And then I had a radio show. So like I said, I've always talked. So I had a radio show. It ended, and then I got the podcast, and I had to rebrand the podcast a few times because life situations, and then me finding myself again. I was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And then the same thing when COVID happened, I opened an online store. So we have, somewhat similar. But I just love that stuff just kept happening. I wanted to say talk your shit because you was talking. You was like, I'm a bestseller. It was for the 37 days. I'm still in the top bestseller. Like what I do, it does what it's supposed to do. And I love when somebody like, we heard your story. You went through all the hell and high water. What did Maya Angelou? She said, I went to hell, but it was round trip. Like sometimes you go to hell, but then you come back and things are so much better. Like you said earlier, like you living your best life, you enjoying it, and sometimes it happens when you're young. It can happen, it don't necessarily have an age group or when things gonna happen. It's like you have to go through you have to go through your go through to get to where you know where you're at. Like everything you just said was like, I'm over here. I wish I had the clap button because like you doing your thing and it's all because you're being who you are. And that's what I want people to understand with what we're talking about with mental health. You still got to go to counseling. It don't matter how successful, how much you doing, like, life still happens to you. So you still have to work on that. But everything starts with being yourself. And both of us have told you guys, like, yeah, we was, married. She'd been married a couple of times. I mean, yeah, she's been married twice. I'm sorry. I joke a little bit. But she's been married more. She's been married more than I have. But each time she did, or the time I did, we had to find a new person. And like you can't stay stagnant even after relationship. Sometimes people jump from relationship to relationship. It's like, you don't think something is you. It's not them. You got a new man every holiday. You got a new girl every holiday. It's you. It's not them. And you haven't found yourself. And now it's like you said how many days you went on 100 something.
I did.
Yeah. Now
I learned at the end of every chapter, it tells you like the lesson that I learned during that period of time. Because the book is actually organized like my podcast. It's A to Z, the A to Z of my life. So it starts off with attitude and then boldness and then caution. So I actually got some friends out of dating. The guy that I'm with now, I met, when I was going through all these dates. So it was a journey, but I grew so much, and they can follow my journey and see all the epiphanies I had.
It's an adult book.
Yeah, a lot of people love it. They're like, wow.
Because when I think of a movie, when you said you went on 147 days, I think like, I don't know. I don't think it's a movie similar like to a girl where she going on dates. I just think of a Lifetime or some type of movie. Like you might want to do a movie on that 147 days. Like you should, hey, if you do that, just remember I threw that little seed, in the air. If you do a movie or a play or something, maybe I can help. I don't know, but like for a guy, when you think of 140, I'm thinking, yeah, okay, yeah. Anyways, but just if you do something with it, remember I threw that seed out there. And me and your kids, have the same birthday, so yeah, just go ahead and throw that out there. So you remember, and I gotta record it, so we could just go off of that. So, um, what are like some tips that, because you went through what you went through and now you're excelling, you're into the mental health, you got the podcast, you got the books, you got things, you got material and product to help people, with mental health or just to be a better person. So I usually ask 3 tips. What are 3 tips you could give people where when they listen to this, they can take away and they can start doing today?
One, I would say to slow down sometimes and reflect. I think that journaling is a great way to do that. I think that meditation is a great way to do that. Just getting silent. Sometimes you get your best ideas when you wake up first in the morning or when you're about to go to bed because your subconscious is a little more active when you're sleepy or when you're just waking up. So to give yourself, to listen to yourself when you first wake up and when you first, when you're getting ready to drop off to sleep, or to even ask yourself a question as you're getting ready to go to sleep, let your subconscious work on it. So I would say just slow down and listen to your inner voice would be one of my first tips. Trust the universe, trust yourself, trust that if you take a risk that things will work out, because even failure can be just a basically a guide to your success. So you don't have to say, well, that failed. No, that taught you something. So build on that failure. So take that risk, and regardless of the outcome, build on the failure, build on the success, and keep moving forward. And I would also say bet on yourself. Bet on yourself, because we bet on everybody else. We're so encouraging to so many people in our lives, but when it comes to ourselves, a lot of times we think of why we can't, why we shouldn't, why we don't, and we make excuses. But bet on yourself, and give yourself that same encouragement that you would give other people, that same push that you would give other people. You wouldn't let your friends sit on their talents. You would push them. So do the same thing for yourself.
I love it. I love number 3 because that's kind of like when I was speaking, that was my like title, bet on yourself, and I broke down the word. It's believe, effort, and trust, and I broke it down. But I love that. But I like the first one, trust yourself, because sometimes we do things and we don't really trust. So, for instance, my son, he's 8, and we play. He's into basketball. He's working on it, and he just shooting. He just shooting. And I'm like, dude, you gotta believe you gonna make every shot. You're not gonna make every shot, but you gotta shoot like you believe that you're gonna make every shot. Just because you missed the last one, you still gotta remember you can make that shot. And I think when we start trusting ourselves, it helps because you'll take a risk. Like, let me try it. Because what's the worst thing that can happen? You be in the same situation that you're in. You know what I'm saying? Like, you not like when you trust, you take that leap. It's just like I don't know if you ever went ziplining. Once you go, you can't go backwards. You got to go forward, and it ain't the easiest going forward. It's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm scared, but I can't go backwards. I've took this risk already, and then when I got finished, I was like, oh, that's fun. I would do this again because I took a risk, and I couldn't. You can't go back once you do that. And then you said slow down. You was talking to me like slow down, reflect, meditate, listen to yourself, ask yourself a question. Like, I think we be on the move. You might be in a situation where you're like, oh, I gotta get this money. I gotta do this and do that, do that, do that, do that. And it's like, when do you have time for yourself? When are you actually? You can't really even create when you're on the go because your mind's all over the place. And like, you have to like really slow down. But one thing, I don't know. I think I might name this episode "Failure as a Guide" because that kind of like was dope, and that kind of how with you, like a lot of 2 failed marriages, you learn it was a guide to get you back to get not get you back to get you forward to where you're at, and where you could be yourself and where you could do whatever you want to do. You can go on 1,000 dates. You can, whatever you want to do, you can do that. And I'm just joking when I said 1,000 dates. Uh, but like, I think that, do you think that's, what you think about the title? What do you think about that? Failure is a guide. Ask your opinion.
I think it's a pretty good title. I think it's going to make people stop and be like, huh, I wonder what that's about. So I think it's one of those curiosity hooks. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think
Okay. See, I'm on to something. I'm pretty smart guy. I kind of, that's what I was thinking. Like, people, failure is a guy. Let me click this. So before you let everybody know how they can reach out to you and all that, I need an underdog quote. It could be your favorite quote. It could be a quote you live by. Something to. I'm sure you got good stuff. So just give us a quote.
Okay, there's two that I normally say for my podcast. The tagline is enhance your life, impact your circle. And for my show, the tagline is get Zen, stay Zen, spread Zen.
Okay.
So those both tie to mental health, about basically, once if you get yourself right, then you can spread that positivity and that into the world. But then, the get Zen, stay Zen, spread Zen, that's about getting your mind right, getting Zen, getting it into a state of peace and positivity, and then stay Zen, creating a life that perpetuates that, rituals that perpetuate that, a life that you don't have to escape from, in a sense. And then spread Zen, spreading that out, into your circle of influence. So both of those taglines are kind of quotes that's kind of my purpose in the world, and everything I do revolves around those things.
I love it. I see how kind of threw your name in there. That's dope. I like that. But I like the first. I like both of them, but the first one is like enhance your life, impact your circle. And that's so true, because sometimes we hold on to circles or people, and it's like, I love you, but I see myself going somewhere else, and it's not like that person's holding you back. It just might be the environment that you're in. It's like you're comfortable, you like cool, but then I always say this reference. It's like KD. He was on a good team. He got his boys, they winning, but they ain't winning. He get to the Warriors, now he winning because he's around winners. When you get around winners, it ain't that you look back like, dang, bro wasn't this and that. It's just like, we didn't know how to win. Like, we didn't have these people around us. Like, everybody winning. It's like, when you're around winners, nobody like, oh, I got this X amount. It's like, okay, hey, I just got this deal. I know such and such. You want his number? Something of that sort. So I love that, because you definitely have to get around winners by impacting your circle. And don't stay in a circle too long, because you're gonna go in a circle. You're gonna be going in a circle when you stay in a circle. That's kind of, I might tweet that. But how can people reach out to you? How can they get in touch with you? Because you dope. I love your story, and then now you doing your thing. And I applaud you for just starting back writing and being able to help people. Because when you're a bestseller, when you get numbers, it's not the profit, it's the impact that you're making, because you're helping a lot of people. So kudos to you. And how can people reach out to you?
Well, my name is Zen Ashe. That's Zenase. That's 2 words. So you can find me, Zen Ashe, on Facebook, Zen Ashe Poetry, all one word, on Instagram. So Zenase Poetry. On Twitter, it's Ashe Poetry, ASE Poetry. I'm on LinkedIn. On Amazon, you can look up Zen Ashe, or Zenergize Your Life is the guided journal. The other book, the poetry memoir, is called Plenty of Guppies. So if you just type in Plenty of Guppies, it'll come up. Plenty of Guppies and Other Dating Misadventures is the full title of the book, and there's a little subtitle under it, So you can find me on Amazon. You can find me on Goodreads. I've got reviews on the book on Goodreads, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm Zenergy3 on TikTok. And the podcast is Zenergy. It's ZENNURGY. I also have a website, laughsandlyrics.com. That's LAUGHZAND lyrics.com, because my live show is Laughs and Lyrics, which is comedy, music, and poetry. I do that a couple times a year. So that's pretty much how people can find me.
And I will have all those links in the description of the show. Do you have any closing word? Well, before you have any closing words, I want to say thank you again for being on the show, adding value not just to the listeners but to myself. Appreciate you. And do you have any closing words?
May you walk in Zenergy.
And on that note, peace, one love.